Okay, joining us in the studio is Chief Research Officer, Center for Black and African Arts and Civilization, Adesegun Dosunmu. Good morning.
Good morning.
Ẹ káàárọ̀.
Ẹ káàárọ̀, ẹ kú ojúmọ́. Ṣàlàáfíà ni.
Adúpẹ́ o.
Ṣé jíire.
Ajire, Ajibi, I think. Yes. Okay, yeah.
So, I mean, really seriously, would it be an academic exercise to define what language and culture is really? And are Nigerian languages really at risk of being extinct?
Honestly, more than before now, Nigerian language has always been threatened. Threatened by, different things. One, the invasion of foreign culture, the invasion through the foreign media, and the lack of censorship of the things the public is exposed to. So our languages are threatened, and it's because we de-emphasize their use, we de-emphasize or discourage their use both at the level of the home, at the level of the school, and the society at large. It is important to say that our language is the means through which we express our culture. Without our language, our culture is dead. Language has always been a means through culture is expressed. So,
And preserved, is it?
And preserved, and of course, language has to do with communication, while culture is the totality, of the mores, the ways of life, the values, of the people, as passed on and as learned from generation to generation.
All right. According to UNESCO, the word mother tongue is defined as the first language a child speaks, meaning connotes the fact that that's what the child hears from the mother. But in the case where the mother speaks another language, for instance,
Like
English language, so does that qualify as the child's mother tongue?
Of course, it's just like the food the baby takes. It's either you give the baby the breast milk, which is very original, or you substitute it with some other baby formulas, which could be very defective to the development of the child. So importantly, the mother tongue, the first language the baby learns should be the actual indigenous language of the parent. That is, if the parent too is not deficient, because for a child to learn, there must be something to give. If it is absent, then there's nothing to give. So what is available is what the parent will give.
And that's really amazing, because the trend now seems to be a situation where parents themselves don't even speak the language, or even if they do. I mean, we all remember going to school and we're told English and French speaking only, vernacular forbidden. Our languages were referred to as vernacular, and they were forbidden. So how has society helped, and even the educational system?
You see, it's a backlash of colonial, mentality. It's the backlash, and there is this saying that even if you were born in a particular way, there's a need for a rebirth, and the absence of a rebirth becomes very problematic. That means that if there's a problem at the point of birth, so the individual is likely to live on with that problem, even till death. So it is important that we get off this colonial psychology, which makes the use of the language, very important and seemingly, seemingly useful. So it is important that our indigenous languages, they are such that we emphasize right from childhood up to adulthood and even till death.
Okay,
and
at this point, let's just bring in on the phone the Director General of Center for Black and African Arts and Civilization, Ferdinand Anikwe. Good morning and thanks for joining us. Okay, so obviously there is a risk here to Nigerian languages. We're not just talking about Yoruba, that the Lagos state government is trying to ensure, is put back or gets its position. What do you think about the situation right now where Nigerian languages may just be out in another 75 years?
Hello.
Good morning, Mr. Anikwe. Did you hear my question?
Yeah, repeat.
Okay, let me just be brief. We've been told that Nigerian languages are at risk of being extinct in another 75 years. What has brought us to this point?
Well, I am Dr. Ferdinand Anikwe. We are saying that we will not allow Nigerian languages to go extinct. But government and parents must be partners in the process of ensuring that we use our languages. One of them is where we commend the Osun State government that has passed a law for all the primary school pupils and those in the secondary school to use Yoruba language before they go to the next level of academic pursuits. And we are urging all state governments across the federation to ensure that from primary school it is compulsory for every child to start from his or her own vernacular. One of the greatest educationists in this country, late Professor Bar Swafonwa, said that it is better for a child to be educated in his or her own vernacular before he learns another language. And we know that the languages of our people have hidden all our tendencies, philosophies, ideologies, ideas, history, and anything our country, our community can contribute for world development. To this extent, we are now saying that all languages in Nigeria should be taught properly at the pre-primary, at the primary and secondary school levels. And I can tell you further that our parents are the people killing the development of our local languages by trying to compel all the children to speak English. And most of the time, the English they teach them are not even the real English. They teach them all kinds of rubbish, all in an attempt to say that they are now better informed. It is the introduction of confusion across the land. We are insisting on the languages. I am here in Ibadan because a group from the entire Igbo nation called me for a promotion of Igbo language and culture. I'm here with some other Igbo persons like Zebudayo Korigbo, the man who used to see the television, he's Chika Obara, and the rest of us. We are going to talk. Well, we have a scholar, the PhD Igbo scholar from University of Lagos, Chigozie Nabife, is going to talk today for 3 hours in Igbo language. We won't allow our languages to die. If anything to go by, the Yorubas and the Hausas have done better than some other groups. And we're also insisting that every ethnic group in Nigeria must ensure that their languages are properly put on the norm. I am the chairman of Pan-African Cultural Congress Bureau. And in Johannesburg last year...
Okay, Dr. Anikwe.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. There are arguments that the reason for the anticipation extension is because some of those languages are very difficult to speak and understand. Is there any way some of them can be simplified for the young ones to be able to learn them and speak them fluently?
Well, I thought that what I'm telling you is on how to ensure that these languages go on.
Yes, is there any way they can be simplified? Some people have argued that some of them are difficult to understand.
Is there any way they can? Hello?
Yeah, some people have argued that some of these languages are difficult to understand and speak. Is there any way they can be simplified for the younger ones to be able to speak them?
Every language on earth has its own simple and difficult areas. It is wrong to think that any language is difficult. There is no difficult language. My sister, we were taught Latin. and the people use it. What about the German language that has all the shon? It is a matter of methodical development and insistence on applications of these languages. They should not tell you all that. I was telling you that in Johannesburg last year, as the chairman of Pan-African Cultural Congress Bureau, we insisted that by 2063, African communications in AU meetings must be done in African languages. And if we don't insist on developing our own in Nigeria, we will grow up to learn Kiswahili and therefore in Ghana and the rest of other languages across the African nations. In fact, of Nigeria's leading population in Africa. So we must come back to our language usage.
All right, Dr. Anikwe, let's still remain with you. I mean, you are the DG of the Black and African Arts Center, so I would like to get a lot more insight from you. So what happens? What really are the implications, you know, if the language of a people disappears? What happens to them?
That language, those people whose language has disappeared, they have also disappeared from the face of the earth. You don't talk about them again. They are dead. It is the language that shows identity. It's the language that locates where you come from. It's the language that summarizes your culture. It is language that talks about your feelings. When your language is gone, you are dead and buried.
Okay, Mr. Dosumu, you just heard your boss there saying if the language dies, the people die as well. Do you agree with that? I know you may not want to, but can we just have your objective
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, language death is the worst disaster that could befall human community. And once language dies, people die because people are the vehicle through which languages are expressed. And languages, it's a means of communication that defines people, that shows identity. Once identity dies, once people's definition, you know, fades away, then we can be sure that the people are dead, irrespective of whether physically buried, because language, our language, makes us to be visible. It is through our expression of ourselves, you know, that we can be seen, we can be heard. So the absence of language is like living in a world of deaf and dumb.
All right.
Now, let me even add to, you know, what an explorer with National Geographic once said, Wade Davis. He said, when a native speaker dies, language culture dies with him, and by extension, the accumulated window of the ages from the knowledge of medicinal plants and the collective values of humanity dies with him. I mean, these are very, very serious. It means even our health. You know, I remember my mom telling us when we were much younger that, she, you know, as a young girl, she could go into the garden and, you know which plant is good for what and all of that. But I doubt if she still has that capability now.
You see, the interesting thing about language, interesting thing about language is that language is the repository, is a library. Once it dies, it's like burning off the library. Even we can't talk of the written word. You know, the written word is expressed in a language, despite the fact that orthographically it is commuted into writing. But, you know, when language dies, it's the worst thing that can happen. And the nation, too, must prevent, you know, death of languages, because languages defines the people. Right. Without governance and without people, without language, there will be no government.
Okay.
Everything will be in a vacuum.
So let's go back to the simplicity of some of these languages we're trying to talk about when it comes to a curriculum in the schools. Are there ways some of them can be, I mean, the model of teaching them, like your boss was alluding to, the methods of teaching some of this language, is there any way they can be made a little bit simpler for people to understand?
I want to agree with Dr. Anikwe, you know, in that to think that a language is difficult is to think that one is disinterested in the language. Interest drives the learning of languages.
That is the ideal. But what we have now, we're young ones, where students are not interested. How do you make it interesting? That's the question,
Of course,
really.
there are a number of ways it can be made interesting. You know, of course, you've mentioned the curriculum, redesigning the curriculum in a way that, you know, it is appealing, you know, to pupils. There must be more instructional materials such that expressions are not abstractive, they are more real. You know, people are made to see them, you know. So in essence, the new technologies too could come in. You know, we should use cartoons, you know, as a means of communicating our languages and as a means of preserving them. You know, developing, you know, cartoon characters, you know, such that, you know, children can relate with. So it is important that we, at the level of the curriculum, we design the curriculum, and we are very choosy in terms of instructional materials that are used, you know, for the language. With that, with those things, you can be sure that children's interest will be stimulated, you know, towards learning the languages. And then too, we can use reward, the reward system. You know, let there be competitions that will, you know, drive interest of children, you know, and pupils in schools towards learning the languages.
Okay, just hold on there. We're still talking about this really, really interesting, you know, but very serious matter. But we're going out on TVC Entertainment. Viewers there can continue with TVC Breakfast on TVC Nigeria on Concert Channel 190, DSTV 418, GoTV 45, and ACTV 510. Okay, so with a population of 170 million Nigerians, more than 350 ethnic tribes, and many more languages, one would expect that a large number of Nigerians will be proficient in speaking their mother tongue. But it appears this is not the case.
So a recent UNESCO research shows that on the average, 25% of children below 11 years are unable to speak their parents' indigenous languages. And if the trend is not checked, like was said earlier, the research notes that Nigerian languages will be in extinction in 2 to 3 generations. That's in 50 to 75 years' time.
Even the Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, believes that 80% of Nigerian youths, especially those between the age bracket of 12 to 18 years, find it difficult to speak their mother tongue fluently or do not speak them at all. So the question is, how did we get here? We did ask that question earlier. But let me come to you, Dr. Anikwe Ferdinand. Looking at the Ministry of Information and Culture, that in itself, we lost connection with Dr. Anikwe there, but hopefully we can reconnect. So let me, stay with you, Mr. Dosumu. Ministry of Information and Culture. I mean, when you lump these two together, is it not a reflection of the seriousness that we actually attach to, something as serious, or the lack of it, to culture? I mean, shouldn't a Ministry of Culture really be standing on its own in the first place?
Well, it all depends on, who backs the baby. What is important is the baby being placed well on the back of the mother, irrespective of, whether the two are joined together. But the two are very relevant to each other. Information, drives culture. There must be information about culture, and there must be culture of information, and language development is part of the culture of information. How people express themselves, preservation of indigenous languages, is part of it. So there's absolutely nothing wrong. The issue is that it's for more investment to be made in that area. Nigeria craves economic development. Economic development can be achieved when our languages are made to work, when our culture, occupies the centerpiece of our cultural policies, of our policies, national policies. Without this, we will just be, it will be like chasing shadows. And to avoid this kind of a problem, it is important that our languages, form, the beacon, forms the pivot on which our development rests. Without the use of our language, our quest, our desire for technological development, economic development, political development, will somehow be threatened.
Okay, so let's bring more perspectives as always. The coming of the British and English-speaking missionaries in large numbers in the mid-19th century brought up the question of a language to adopt for communication between the indigenous populations and the guests. So subsequent years saw the emergence of the language as the national lingua franca or official language.
And that helped to foster a common means of communication and a form of unity, but also marked the beginning of the decline in the use of indigenous languages. In schools, for instance, English is the language of instruction, and despite the 1999 Constitution giving the National Assembly powers to use indigenous languages during proceedings, nobody is using this.
And Chapter 5, subsection 55 of the 1999 Constitution stipulates that the business of the National Assembly shall be conducted in English and Hausa, Igbo and Yoruba when adequate arrangements have been made. At the level of the state houses of assembly, only in Lagos was a resolution passed for proceedings to be conducted in the mother tongue, and that is the Yoruba language.
This year, the Assembly marks the 7th anniversary of adopting Yoruba language for deliberations every Thursday, with fewer Nigerian children acquiring fluency in their native language. There is a strong case for extinction, not only for the major languages, but also the minority ones.
Out of the estimated 400 existing Nigerian languages, about 152 have less than 5,000 speakers, making them fall under the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO description of endangered languages.
I think we have about 400 of them, according to even the Ministry of Information and Culture. About 4 of them, really, as we speak. And of course, let's backtrack just a little. So UNESCO even predicts that one of Nigeria's major languages, Igbo, may be heading for extinction by 2025 if nothing is done by its speakers.
And that's my language.
Not a good one.
Apart from the fact that, I'm also so I'm of double parentage,
so perhaps
Igbo and Calabar.
Igbo goes into extinction.
Maybe I still have effect to fall back on, but we don't want that happening. So I ask again, how did we get here? Ralph Emerson, yes, okay, we have the DG back, that's the DG of CBAC. Ralph Emerson, when he says, when we discard our own languages, we commit linguicide, we kill or dismember our memories. I mean, this is very clear that we really do have a problem on our hands. Dr. Ferdinand, the law says, business of legislation should be carried out apart from in English, in other Nigerian languages. This is not being done, but thankfully Lagos is, shining the light. What do you think we should be doing going forward?
No, let me get you clearly.
That the Constitution says the language of legislative business should be in the indigenous languages, Yoruba, Hausa, and Igbo. And that is not happening yet.
Well, the point is that without talking of killing any language, the one that is encouraged by the Constitution is not even being used. And that is why we are crying. We are not supporting that any language should be allowed to die in Nigeria. Because every language has one contribution or the other, as I said earlier, to make for the development of the world issues generally. But we're even saying that the Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba thing that appear to have been accepted by the Constitution are not even quite functional. We're saying that all the educational system, particularly the states, must engage in ensuring that these languages don't go extinct. Let me just tell you, it's not just the educational institutions. usage of these languages in the marketplace, using the telephone, as we are talking now. If I were to understand the two of those languages, we should be expanding this through this telephone discussion. So what we are saying is you must engage in the language usage, and you can commit the errors in the language in an attempt to get the language developed. You mustn't become an expert in a language before you start using it. We're saying that in the marketplace, you use this, you know. So if the Constitution says 3, all Nigerian languages are very relevant. A language will die or grow as a result of its usage. Ahmad Bello, when he was alive, gave scholarships on those who used the Hausa, but he was in planning. Hausa language became Franca in the north. It was a very policy by late Ahmad Bello when he was Premier of Northern Nigeria. If any other person does it, like Yoruba has taken the entire Southwest,
All right.
Igbo has taken a greater percentage of Southeast. It does not mean that Efik and Edo and the rest of them will not survive. But our worry is that no language is having its structural implication in terms of usage, because these languages convey meaning which ordinarily will be lost.
All right. Doctor, let's talk about the issue of a global village phenomenon or global integration. How does that come to play here?
What?
Global village phenomenon, global interaction, global integration. How globalization? How does that play up here?
Well, globalization, what have you? Let me tell you, it is what you tell the computer that the computer will show to the world. We are competing with the world of other languages, and I said our own telephone. Like now, if I want to use Igbo language, I will talk to another Igbo person. I say Kidu in the text message. He replies Odimma. The same thing in the Yoruba and the Hausa. We will not allow ourselves to be struck out. We will contribute as the Americans are trying to dominate the world. If we keep quiet, we will be swallowed. So the issue of the world is a global village, understandably so. But we are also supposed to be part of it. If we make the input, will be part of the competition. You don't just fold your arms and say world internet and what have you.
There's something called intuitive perception, which can only happen when you speak your own mother tongue. But really, the debate as to whether indigenous language should be promoted is really not about dropping, say English, for example, English as a second language. How beneficial really is it for a person to be multilingual, especially in a globalizing world like this, Mr. Dosumu?
Of course, there's immense benefit in multilingualism. Of course, it makes you global. You are global, you are not restricted, you are multicultural, and to a very large extent, in terms of interaction, there are no impediments. So it is encouraged that even for development, to be copied, for development to be emulated from those that are developed, your access, access to their language makes one to be more, more acceptable. And it makes, the given language, the given culture, to be more open and, very generous towards the person interested in learning it. So, issue of language, makes the world, closes the gap among people, irrespective of the fact that there are oceans, there are rivers, there are seas, that separates them. But languages, once it is learned, then one becomes, the ambassador of such communities anywhere one finds himself or herself.
Okay, Dr. Anikwe, let's talk about the issue of literature written in those languages, or the lack of literatures in those languages that will fear may just go into extinction anytime soon if nothing is done. How can that trend be changed?
About lack of literature. Any Igbo man that wants to read Igbo language, from FC Ogbalu to Peter Wanna to Ishaku Daranala, A lot of them. I've told you there are several PhDs in these languages.
Just in Igbo,
Yoruba
we are talking of the
language,
languages that may go into extinction, Doctor. What happens to them? We don't have literatures in them. What happens? How can that be changed?
You mean others that are not Igbo, Hausa, and Yoruba?
Yes, those other
No,
languages that will
you
fear
see,
migrant.
when we held a language seminar sometime about 5 years ago, one professor from the University of Maiduguri told us the problems of some of these languages that are being swallowed by others. That was when we now knew that Ahmad Bello actually encouraged the use of Hausa language. And so many languages up north got swallowed. But we're now saying that how to get these languages started is by encouraging the development of a PhD in a university in one of those languages, who eventually tries to help produce some others, first degrees and MScs, that will now go into the field and produce people from colleges of education.
How many people are interested in going for a PhD in a language as we speak in Nigeria, Doctor?
No, there are many of them. They may not be as many as you expected. You see, we are afraid that if we keep quiet, we lose a lot of things. It is through the educational system that we must revive these languages. And some of them, the little we have, through research, must be re-established in the schools, universities, colleges of education, because colleges of education produce wonderful teachers who now, in turn, produce the pupils in primary and secondary schools. There are many languages around Maiduguri that are dying. There are others too. You know, unfortunately, you might be thinking that these three major languages are actually the language. There are several others.
Indeed, we're very aware of that, Dr. Anikwe, but let me just remain with you. Speaking of literature, I know that some years back, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, the Kenyan literary icon, did suggest that, you know, African literature should be written in indigenous languages. Are you saying then that we should be looking at reading Ogboju Ode Nigbo Irumole rather than Forest of 1,000 Demons? How will that help the generality of the people?
Let me tell you, if it is only 2-3 persons that can write in that language, they will start. Igbo language, the first person that wrote it, read the economics. Chidozie Ogbaru was the very first person that wrote Igbo language, syntax, all those things. And then others took time and started developing it. You don't wait for any expert to drop from heaven. The little ones, even primary school teachers who can use maybe a trick and the others, will start writing, no matter how small. I was in Bayelsa, in Yeregua, and you know the Jaws have varied dialects in their language, and 8 of them were developed by the Bayelsa state government. People started reading. I was there, and certificates were given to teachers who came up in different dialects of the Jaw language. And it was encouraged by the governor of Bayelsa state. So we don't allow these languages to go because there's no much literature. The little we have, you write it as much as, and start from there.
All right, Mr. Dosumu here, would you want to react to what your boss just said now? But
well,
before you do that, I like to just chip in this. Do you think sometimes some of these approaches that we adopt might be too elitist, too academic, really, sometimes? Because you're waiting for somebody to have a PhD, for instance, before some of these things are done. When do you take off?
No, I think what he is trying to say really is the fact that, you know, learning the language should be encouraged, you know, to the highest level, you know, of knowledge. You know, having a PhD. PhD are resource people that could further develop the language and look for better ways of, you know, spreading the use of the language. So he's actually not saying that, you know, we should be enmeshed, you know, in bureaucracy, you know, or associated with language development. You know, the use of language should be such that it's dynamic, such as culture too is dynamic, and multivarious approaches, you know, should be used in tackling the problem of, you know, linguistic disorder, language death, as we envisage, could happen in the nearest future. Now, there is the issue relating to literature that you've just mentioned, has to do with, first and foremost, how do we standardize the orthography of the various languages? The orthographies are keys through which people can access the languages, the way they are written. And several languages today, they are not yet having the written form. The benefit Yoruba language has is because of the access to Western education. And that's why the development, the commitment of Yoruba into writing has helped the development of the language. Although there's a problematic. The problem is that Yoruba is a language that is spoken across 2, 3, 4 countries, and with different colonial background. So there's a need for the standardization of the orthographies such that an economy of scale can be achieved in the use of the language.
But will that not happen organically? For some of those, perhaps, is that not also what is responsible for some of those non-standardized languages going into extinction? You don't think so?
Yes, I think more effort should be put in that direction of, helping other languages, because every language preserves history, preserves culture, preserves even the entirety of lifestyle of the people. So every language deserves every attention, and no language deserves death.
Be left behind.
Be left behind.
Okay, so let's go back to Dr. Ferdinand Anikwe. Is it really that we have been taught over time by the colonialists to be ashamed of who we are, and all of this is playing out in dropping our language, our food, our clothing, what we wear, and our appearance generally? Are these just symptoms of a deeper problem?
Yeah, you are talking of colonialism and the destruction of our languages.
Indeed. And how this is just playing out in in us not speaking our language, or even being ashamed to speak our language.
Well, it's merely stating the obvious. When I was in the secondary school, we were flogged by using our dialect. It's not even the matter. What we are saying is how to get these things around now, how to turn around, how to make sure that these languages are revived. It's part of the contributions which we've made, and my colleague from the other side. I just want to drop one thing, that if a language wants to die, you merely call an expert in linguistics. Somebody who is an expert in linguistics develops a language without even knowing the meaning, and they use that by science of language. If there is still somebody who can speak it, then that language will not die. Those who are linguistics will develop it. There are the people who first of all started our own. Even the white man who came in here wrote Igbo language without understanding it, wrote Yoruba language without knowing what it meant. Then you will now see how it is written, and you make use of it. So what we're saying in terms of colonial destruction of our languages is that you, who has the language, will not allow it to die. So we a lot of times we fall back on what the colonialists have done. We're saying that a lot of things must be revived. I tell you, that is an example of what we are finding out, even at the political level. When we imported Westminster Bay model, and we failed because they crossed carpet. And then we went after the military interregnum, we imported again from not the Atlantic, crossing the Atlantic from America, and the presidential system. And they teach Barabé Musa, and I'm teaching some others. Our people look for the worst escape route. We are now saying we must come to our own. The Alaafin of Oyo has a political system which we should copy. There are many things we should come back to. Therefore, we don't continue complaining about colonialism. We'll research on our own original process of both administration and language development. The owner of Ife. We'll go to all these people, and then we'll come back to what we have.
Okay, Dr. Anikwe, just hold on for us there. And of course, this is where we call in Moses Omogana to give us what's going on on social media. Good morning to you, Moses.
Good morning, or perhaps I should say Ekaro.
Ekaro.
In the spirit of
How do you say it in
Nigerian
Edo
language.
language?
You're from Edo State. Come on, let's hear it.
Okay.
Oh, shoot.
Can
Okay, we're not
I'm
gonna. Oh, so
disappointed.
sorry we put you on the spot
Jeez.
there. You see, that's what we're talking about.
I feel like a guinea pig right now.
You are really.
Okay, so the hashtag, Nigerian languages, has been buzzing, of course, and yes, very first comment comes from Heaven. Looking forward to a day whereby Nigerian languages would be acceptable in every institutions and every tongue globally. And CD says, I speak 3 Nigerian languages fluently. I understand 5 and I speak 2 foreign languages. That's one way to stay relevant in today's world. And African Fact says, Nigeria's first president, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, spoke Hausa, Igbo and Yoruba, the 3 major native Nigerian languages. And David Olaranwaju says, it is good to teach our children our Nigerian languages at their tender age. Tenor says, I take pride in speaking 4 Nigerian languages fluently, save for Yoruba. I take pride in knowing my way around in over 25 states of the Federation. Good for you. And Biafra Boy says, God forbid, but imagine all native Nigerian languages dying and everybody being left with Pidgin English or just formal English. Okay, now back to you, Ngozi. Yes, good morning in my language is Naibia.
There
you go.
I feel redeemed right now. Okay, so we've been talking about learning how to speak the languages, but really in today's world we've gone past speaking the languages just for communication's sake, or or within finding your way around the terrain, like someone rightly said. But how can we make our Nigerian languages, or at least the 3 major dialects, economically and globally viable? That's little wonder why an average Nigerian want to learn how to die hard want to speak French or Spanish. How can we make these languages, economically attractive and globally attractive as well?
Well, making Nigerian languages very attractive has to do with the kind of publicity you give it.
Okay.
If it is deliberate, you can be sure that more people will use it. And then 2 is the need to develop what is called cultural diplomacy. Using our languages as a cultural diplomatic tool. Okay. As a source of influence. And this revolves around organizing programs such that our languages will be showcased to the world. Take for instance, I could see you punching in a few things, and it's because of the interest that has driven your knowledge for English. The same thing, if our languages are done that same way, we can be sure that people seeing you doing that will be encouraged to want to emulate what you have done. So I think what it's important is for publicity, enormous publicity, to be given to Nigerian languages, irrespective of status, whether it is in the majority 3 or in the few minorities or in the least minority. It is important that we should, find ways of documenting them, then developing them so that it can be applicable even at the the level of information technology. We can develop keyboards in all these languages. We can develop other media applications in all these languages for them to be accessible. But one thing is very basic. Knowledge about all these things should be given to the people.
Okay. Moses?
Perhaps we should have a breakfast show in Yoruba and Igbo.
Yes, and Efik and
You're
Hausa.
definitely going to anchor that.
Yeah, I will, with all pleasure.
You know how we roll.
Okay.
Yeah, see you much later.
Udabo.
Yeah, bye.
Bye. All right, so let's go to the DG now, Dr. Anikwe Ferdinand. Yes, we must thank, of course, our guest right here in the studio, Adeshegun Dosumu, who's the Chief Researcher of CBAC. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you here.
I'm so privileged.
And finally, Dr. Anikwe, so what is the way forward? Moses touched on Pidgin English. That seems to be getting some kind of ascendancy right now. How can we put Nigerian languages out there? That's the simple question.
Well, the way forward is a combination of several factors. One is making sure that our government, particularly at the state level, get involved in ensuring that these languages are spoken from infancy. The other one is for our parents not to think that English language is all and all. You will start from your local language. And then the third one is that our journalists should also learn to ask us questions, compelling us. In our own languages, if a Yoruba man who is serving as a DG or a minister, once in a while you ask him one question in Yoruba, ask me too in Igbo. Whether you like it or not, at the national level, you might be thinking that others all will not understand it at the same time. But those who understand, it can also be translated. What I'm saying is that we insist on using these languages. Our newspapers, there are very few newspapers that talk on our local languages. Why can't we encourage them? There was something they used to call Ogene before. The first language in Nigeria, the first newspaper in Nigeria, in Abeokuta, was written in Yoruba language. But now I have not seen most of them again. So let's get back to these things because we are richer in the use of our language.
Okay, let's quickly touch on the use of the local languages for business. My colleague here talked about making the languages economically viable. Well, how can the day-to-day businesses, retail business, come into play here and help? Like if you go to the market to buy oil, perhaps, is there any kind of a way those people in the market square can help?
No, definitely in that area, we have even progressed more. If we go to make all the markets, for instance, in Enugu, they use Igbo language. Most of the markets here in Ibadan, they use Yoruba. In those areas, we are not lacking very much. We are lacking much in other social usages, not in the market. In the market, because you must want to buy cheaper, you use the language of the seller. And a lot of times, the seller even wants to learn the language of the buyer to make sure that he sells his goods. So at the market level, we have improved. But outside that, we drop because in the offices, we use English language and hardly sure where we come from. So the economic communication, in terms of buying and selling strategies, the language improves there. It is only when you come into some markets, that you use one or two outside languages that you fall into problem. But if you are in any of these states, even the Edo you are talking about, if you go to Benin, they say Wakoyo, you use the Edo language. In all these other local communities, it's just if there are people who don't want the languages to go, there are those who buy and sell at the local market. So
okay, Dr. Anikwe, before I let you go, on a lighter note, in what language do you pray? In what language do you pray?
Pray?
Yes. When you want, yes.
I pray in my language, Igbo language, at times, because even the English language, you don't know whether God will hear you. We are not experts in English. You can make mistakes. So if you make mistake in praying to God, God may not forgive you. So it's better you use your local language.
Oh my. Okay, well, that is really instructive. You know, why I asked that question, as funny as it may sound, you know, like I talked about intuitive perception, which you can only have when you speak your own indigenous language. I can imagine, you know, all of us who go to church or mosque or wherever we go to worship, you know, doing our worship in a borrowed language, in a foreign language. I wonder how that affects your relationship with your Creator.
My sister, I was in Jerusalem, and I went to Jordan, where Christ was baptized. Nearly all languages on earth were written there. I saw Yoruba, it was written by Fashola. I saw Igbo, it was written by Obi, Peter Obi. So that showed me that God understands all those languages. So pray to God in your own local language, and God will forgive you your sins. If you try other languages, you make mistakes, and you might not be forgiven.
Okay, that's according to you, not according to the Holy Book, but
thank you so much. That's the Director General, Dr. Anikwe Ferdinand, DG of Center for Black and African arts and culture. It's been nice talking with you on,